Joining us now to share some insight on this important topic is Ethan Lane. He's the Executive Director of the Public Lands Council and NCBA Federal Lands. Ethan, thank you so much for coming to the show for a few moments.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin by talking about why public lands are so critical to the beef industry at large.
You know, federal lands in the West are a big component of how we get cattle fed in the western United States. We have 250 million acres of federal grazing permits in the West. About 22,000 cattlemen and sheep producers operate in 14 western states. It makes up about 40% of the western herd, and you really can't get our business done in the West without using those federal lands.
And you talk about these western ranchers, they've really had to deal with some burdensome regulations. Tell us what the recent regulatory rollback is going to mean, particularly for some of these western ranchers.
Well, you know, because of that large federal footprint, the West sort of serves as a laboratory for the federal government to experiment with some of their different regulatory adventures they like to go on, whether it's the Endangered Species Act or new planning rules like we've seen with the BLM Planning 2.0 proposal. All of them have a chilling effect on how our members can really get their work done on the ground. We know that the lands in the West, the rangelands, are in the healthy condition they are because of the hard work our ranchers do. And every time they have to deal with arbitrary regulations from Washington, it impedes their ability to really manage those lands the way they know how.
No doubt, you talked about endangered species. We've had to deal with some of that in Colorado, certainly. What's your sense on the Endangered Species Act and the need for reform of that act?
There's probably no bigger issue impacting western ranchers and really all land users in the West at this point than the Endangered Species Act. We have more than 1,000 species listed currently domestically on the Endangered Species Act. Only about 49% of those have recovery plans in place. That means 51% of listed species have all the restrictions of a listing with no path forward and no goals for recovery. So we have some really clear goals for accomplishing some reform, getting some restrictions in place so that when they make those listings, it's truly based on science and there's a path forward to recovery. We're going to be working with Congress. Those conversations have already started, and we look forward to pursuing that over the next couple of years to not just provide some relief, but make sure we're focusing those resources on species that really need the help.
And I was going to ask you, I mean, it seems like we have a Congress and a president that may be open and amenable to some significant reform. What's your sense?
You know, we do think that we have an opportunity here with this president. He's been very clear about his desire to roll back regulations. He had this 2-for-1 regulatory rollback executive order that we've seen recently. This is all good news for those of us that have been fighting this regulatory battle for a long time. Obviously, we're one of many groups that have a long list for this new administration and the new 115th Congress. We've received a lot of positive feedback so far. We're excited about the opportunities, and we're happy with the engagement we've received from the new administration. So we look forward to getting some things done.
One last question. What are some of the key priorities for Public Land Council as you look ahead to 2017?
So we're focusing on reform of the Endangered Species Act, reform of the National Environmental Policy Act, and all of these things go back to that local input and ability of the federal government to really listen to local impacted landowners and ranchers. That's where the knowledge lies, that's where the know-how is to get these issues resolved, and we need to make sure the federal government focuses more on that input as they make these decisions, and so that's where we'll be putting our effort moving into the next year, as well as just continuing to look for ways to provide stability to the industry in the West and make sure that these families can rely on their ranches and their permits from year to year.
Complex issues, but certainly critical to so many of our members. Thanks for all the work you do, Ethan.
Appreciate it.
For more information on the issues that impact federal lands and the ranchers that graze there, be sure to visit the website publiclandscouncil.org.